To what extent did the reforms of the Labour government of 1945 to 1951 meet the needs of the British people? Background: from 1939 to 45, the government became much more involved in people's lives by organising the rationing of food, clothing, and gave extra meals to expectant mothers. The Labour leader, Clement Attlee, used the Beveridge Report to show how Labour could create a fairer society. This led the British people to vote for Labour in a landslide victory. Factors: the Labour government introduced reforms to address a number of issues such as disease, poverty, education and housing. Overall, the reforms were successful in meeting the needs of the British people. Factor 1. Disease, NHS. A reform Labour introduced was to help tackle disease. K. It established universal healthcare for all. It was to be comprehensive, meeting all demands and treating all medical problems at the point of contact. K. It provided everyone in Britain with access to free medical care from GPs and dentists, along with free glasses, false teeth and prescriptions. Analysis: in tackling disease, the government met the needs of the people because the huge numbers involved of people needing treatment clearly show that there was a direct need and their needs were initially met. The NHS provided a safety net across the whole country, as the fact that the public did not have to pay for their health meant that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, was entitled to equal opportunities of health care. Analysis plus. However, the government was limited in its tackling of disease because the NHS budget rose from the £134 million in 1948 to £356 million in 1950. It was because of this that charges were brought in for glasses, dental treatment and prescriptions. Although charges were small, it undermined the basic idea of free healthcare for all. Factor 2. Want poverty. A reform Labour introduced was to help tackle poverty. K. The Family Allowance Act, 1945, meant a small amount of money was paid to mothers of 2 or more children. There was no attempt to means tests, and the money was paid to mothers, not fathers. K. In the National Insurance Act, 1946, workers paid a weekly contribution of 4 S11 days. Benefits were set at the rate of 26 shillings for a single adult and 42 shillings for a couple. Analysis. In tackling poverty, the government met the needs of the people because it provided the first comprehensive system of social security so people would not be plunged into poverty. It supported people from cradle to the grave, as everyone was entitled to this, regardless of wealth, age or gender. A survey by Seabohm Rowntree in 1951 found that poverty levels had significantly dropped since 1936 by up to 10% in York, suggesting its success. Analysis plus. However, the government was limited in its tackling of poverty because sickness benefits were only available to those who had made 156 weekly contributions, 39 months, making a number of people ineligible and leave them stranded in poverty. Weekly contributions took up about 5% of average earnings, so it left many people worse off than before. Factor 3. Ignorance, education. A reform Labour introduced was to help tackle ignorance. K. Labour focused on building primary schools to accommodate the growing population of young children and the baby boom, so 1,176 new schools were built by 1950. K. In Scotland, the Education Act raised the leaving age to 15 and provided secondary education free to all pupils. Analysis. In tackling ignorance, the government met the needs of the people because secondary schools were divided into 3 different types: grammar, moderns, technical. This helped children, as those who passed the 11+ exam went to grammars and were expected to go university. A long-term problem was the inequality within education. Children from a poorer background had little chance to improve their situation through education. This was meant to tackle that. Analysis plus. However, the government was limited in its tackling of ignorance because children who failed the exam were not expected to stay at school after 15 years and to get unskilled employment. Basing someone's academic future at the age of 11 was regarded as too early, and many children suffered as a result. Many working-class children left school at 15 with few, if any, paper qualifications with limited opportunities. Factor 4. Squalor housing. A reform Labour introduced was to help tackle squalor. The New Towns Act of 1946 aim was to create new towns to reduce overcrowding in cities. It created 14 new towns by 1951, including Glenrothes and East Kilbride in Scotland. Labour were responsible for building around 700,000 council houses with high-quality accommodation. Most were built to a good standard, average size 1,000 sq feet. Analysis. In tackling squalor, the government met the needs of the people because these provided higher quality accommodation, more spacious, and usually had a separate kitchen, bedrooms and living room. New homes also had indoor toilets and electricity. Another advantage was that councils now became the landlord, which protected people from unfair exploitation by private landlords. Analysis plus, however, the government was limited in its tackling of squalor because Labour had planned to build 200,000 prefabricated homes per year to combat overcrowding, but between 1945 and 1948, only 157,000 prefabs had been put up, and in 1946 they only built 55,000. This resulted in some members of the British public squatting in disused army barracks as they had nowhere to live.